What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. In this video, we are jumping into Punisher War Journal Base. This will be a one-shot, as we take a break from everything going on between Punisher and Daredevil. As they wage their war, we are going back into the War Journal and we're diving into the history of Frank Castle. We are picking up in the era before he becomes the Punisher, when he comes home from war and he tries to readjust to society. He tries to be the husband that his wife would want. He tries to be the father that his children need. But like many war veterans, he is finding the transition back to civilian life more difficult than he ever imagined. That being the family man, it's not everything that he thought it might be. And while he tries to hide away from the violence of the world, while he just tries to live with his family and do the day-to-day, destiny can only be kept at bay for so long. So make sure you guys have subscribed to the channel, make sure that you like this video, and with that being said, let's dive into this breakdown. Alright gang, so we are picking up with Maria and Frank sitting down with a therapist. They are currently doing couples counseling, because ever since Frank has gotten home from war, they are having trouble connecting. To be more specific, Frank is having a hard time readjusting to this life, and the therapist lets him know that it is perfectly normal to feel disconnected, to feel detached from civilian life when he is home and on leave. But it is also important to acknowledge the challenges that his partner and children face while he adjusts to all of this. The way Frank sees it, they have a roof over their head, they have some money in the bank, the kids are healthy. He knows that things aren't perfect, but he knows that the world out there is so much harder for so many. And Maria knows that she's lucky. She knows that she's not some spoiled brat unaware of the horrors of the world. But she also doesn't want Frank comparing everything to the worst of the worst. Right now, he is making it sound like it's unreasonable for wanting her husband to communicate and be present. But after this session, the therapist suggests that he start writing down in a journal. And that is where the War Journal truly begins. As the two of them discuss an incident that had happened. There was a Little League game. Frank had gotten angry. As they dive into what had happened, we learn that there was a dad there that was an alcoholic. His son had missed a catch. Once they got back to the car, the father began to yell at the child, to hit the child. When the mother tried to interfere, the drunk man also hit her. And as everybody pretended that they didn't see anything that happened, Frank became more angry. The therapist asking how he felt about this and if he called the authorities. But Frank knows that there is no point, that you cannot change men like this. And of course, the therapist believes that proper help anybody can change. And while Frank says that maybe in a perfect world that could happen, but the truth is, this world is not perfect. And Frank smashed that guy's face into the freaking wall. But we pick up with Frank writing in his journal, not really sure what to write. He has been home for a few weeks at this point, and it's been nice for the most part. Maria turned their guest room into an office, which she called a man cave. Painted, moved all his stuff in here, got all of his posters framed. She really went out of her way to find some kind of recluse area where he could be, but also be at home. They all loved it when Frank was home. Maria's true intention was hoping that this would want him to really stay home, that it might help him with all the boredom. And if he's got to admit, it does feel nice to be back. The days sometimes seem to blend together, and this is what gets him thinking about something that his uncle had told him after coming home from Vietnam. The only time that he ever talked about the war. He said that they had taught him to fight, to kill, to starve, to expect and accept death. But no one ever told him what he would lose if he were to survive. As he gives us this little story from his uncle, he is doing the day-to-day, mowing the lawn, loving his wife, taking the dog out for a walk. And his uncle had said that they never told him that his greatest achievements, the most important events of his life, his greatest triumphs and sorrows, they wouldn't count for anything when you got back home. They didn't tell him that he had missed the battlefield, because in a horrible way it made sense, sometimes more than life back home. That you would see what people are truly capable of and you can never unsee it again. Didn't tell him that the things he would see with his eyes would never leave him again. That you will never be able to unlearn the things that you know. His uncle didn't know that he would lose so much of what made life worth living. Ever since then, he has been thinking back to his uncle, all the things that his uncle lost in his war, and Frank has been wondering if he ever had any of those in the first place. That is what takes us to Halloween, and this day it went wrong from the beginning. The truth is, Frank forgot to get a costume, and Maria wasn't angry, she was just disappointed. He tried to play it off like he was going to be a burglar, but it really didn't work. They are supposed to be going to a Halloween party, and the invitations, they had said no mask and no weapons. But Frank still goes. He goes with his family, they do the trick-or-treating. As they're doing this, Frank hears somebody screaming. Maria telling him that it's Halloween in suburbia. This is not a battlefield that you need to relax. The truth is, Maria believes that he is paranoid. Thinks that he is looking for trouble. This is where we see the entire neighborhood alive. Everybody out conversing, talking with one another, celebrating this festive day. This is where he picks up with a conversation between two individuals in the neighborhood. They ask Frank, "Do you think that there is such a thing as a just war?" And that is when Frank says that there are necessary wars. Now, of course, they don't see the world as Frank does. They don't see how any necessary risk to American life could be worth it. Specifically, it seems that they are talking about the Middle East, about why we should even have troops over there in the first place. That how can our soldiers even be able to tell apart on who is civilian and who is enemy? Frank making a comment that you start with the people who strap explosives to children and work from there. As it gets later in the evening, Maria comes up to Frank, who is sitting by himself with the dog. She asks him where home is, a question that she has continued to ask him. But she also asks, why did he bring that stuff up? The stuff about the war and childs being used as explosives. But they did ask him, and that stuff is his life. For the past few months and years, it has been everything 24/7. As they continue discussing all of this going on, they return home for the night. Maria asking Frank if he is coming to bed. He says he's going to as soon as he walks the dog. Walking the dog down the road, he knew that he heard something before. Not a scream of frightened delight, but involuntary, pained and desperate. A sound that he knows all too well. As he stops in front of a house, there's some giant lug of a man, letting Frank know that his dog is peeing on his car. It looks like this might just get into a little altercation, but this is when a woman and two gentlemen come out of the house. They escort her out, put her into the car, and they drive down the road. And Frank Castle knows mobsters when he sees them. While he hasn't kept up with the local underworld scum, he knows a wise guy when he sees one. Going off into the woodline just a little bit, he ties up the dog to a tree. He puts on that ski mask, and he goes to investigate. TV on in the living room, but down in the basement, we have 3 individuals that are being tied up, and 1 madman. By the looks of it, they seem to have been here for a couple of days. They have been cutting off hands. They have been cutting off feet. Frank knew that he should have trusted his gut. He should have came prepared. But that's not going to stop him from going in. He picks up a brick and he smashes in the dude's head that is standing guard on the outside. As another gentleman comes out, Frank grabs hold of him and breaks his neck. Walking into the room, he sees that there is a man naked tied up on the ground. As Frank goes to set this guy free, cutting the gag from his mouth, he begins to holler, calling to the other thugs, letting them know that there is somebody here. And so Frank immediately picking up a pan, waiting for someone to come into the room. The first guy gets smashed in the face. 3 other individuals in the living room. One by one, they come for Frank. And Frank just begins to demolish these guys. One by one, he is smashing their faces in. He is laying down the hate. That's when the individual that is tied up naked, he is able to crawl over and he bites Frank on the ankle. As Frank drives his foot right into this guy's face, we see that someone came in from behind him and they stuck him with something. That's where Frank wakes up in the basement, tied up, and this psychopath is continuing his torturing. Frank is not sure how long he has been out, but by listening to the TV upstairs, he can assume that it's been roughly an hour. The cops had come and gone in the pockets of these scumbags. That's good news for Frank because there will be no investigation because he has every intention of killing this man. That's when this guy goes over to Frank, takes off his mask. He knows who he is. He is the man from down the street. The Italian man, the soldier, the Marine. This is where we see that Frank is able to break the zip ties because they were put on too tight, bulldogging this guy into the ground. Frank's body is still very clumsy. The killer grabbing a saw, getting ready to cut his throat. Frank grabs a needle and shoves it into this guy's eye. Taking this opportunity, he begins cutting everybody free, letting them know to get out of here as quickly as possible. Now back home, Maria goes looking for Frank only to find his journal on the table. Frank currently battling against this man that was torturing these people. Maria reading his journal. The question that she had been asking, where is home? The truth is, Frank didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to lie to her. So he never answered. With Frank picking up a board and cracking this dude's skull wide open. Knocking him out, he pours gasoline everywhere. He lights a match and he burns it down. Getting out of the house, there is still a goon alive. A goon that starts opening up with his weapon. He is shooting at him, but then there is a giant explosion. And all those rounds that had been fired at him, he found where they landed. As he makes his way into the woodline, he finds that his dog is dead. The rounds that were meant for him, they landed in the dog. And so he carries the dead dog back home. In the backyard, digging up a hole. Maria hears this. She goes out to look, anger in her face, but she says nothing. She had asked Frank Castle where is home. He expected her to ask the question again. He is dreading it, but he still wants her to ask. He wants to explain, but she already has her answer. And that will be the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Yet another fantastic issue of Frank Castle. I am absolutely loving this Frank Castle coming home from war. This is hugely highlighting all of the issues that many veterans deal with. There's an old saying that the war begins when you come back home. Because while you may spend a year, multiple years in a war zone, the true war is when you get home and you are out of service. You had trained for years to be the deadliest killer on the battlefield, to be the baddest mofo with the biggest stick. Your objectives are easy. Go on patrol, shoot your weapon, come back, eat, and sleep. This is your life day in and day out. Over and over and over again with the brothers that sit by your side. You don't fight for country, you don't fight for freedom. You fight for them. You fight to keep them alive. They become your family. They become your brothers. And so when you come home, none of this is applicable to real life. You look around the world, you see the abundance that people have, where in civilian life, people are complaining about the smallest of things. Upset that someone used the wrong pronoun. Upset that gas prices went up 10 cents. Acting as if their entire day has been ruined because Starbucks got their order wrong. You see how much people take advantage of the life that they have here. But through your eyes, you have seen the horrors of humanity. You have seen what somebody can do to another person. You have seen the true face of humanity, stripped away of luxury, stripped away of government, stripped away of everything that makes America America. When you take away the TV, when you take away all the things that we take for granted every single day, when you strip it down to the very nakedness of humanity, you are left with violence and brutality. And there's a thing that I used to say, is that living here in America, this is an illusion. It is a bubble. Inside of this bubble, you are safe. You are protected. You have everything that you could ever dream of right at your fingertips. You can order from Amazon. You can go get a cheeseburger. You don't have to worry about violence, about death. But outside of this bubble, in those third world countries, there is starvation. There is death on the daily. It is a struggle to survive. It is civil war. It is genocide. And once you have seen these things, it is so very difficult to unsee it. It is difficult to not become cynical and bitter, to be angry as everybody takes advantage of all the luxury that they have in this life. I can honestly say that readjusting back into civilian life is one of the hardest things to do. And sometimes not everybody is able to make it through this readjustment, which is why for a long time, there were 22 veterans a day killing themselves. And so when it comes to this issue of The Punisher, I think it highlights every aspect of what I have just said. It does such an amazing job of connecting you to what a veteran's experience is. The story in this book, I couldn't have made it better myself. I couldn't have said it better myself. If you want to understand what it is to be a veteran, to come home and to deal with the day-to-day, this comic book is about as close as you can get to what it is truly like to live in the mind of a veteran. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your theories. If you would like to get completely caught up on everything going on with this series, be sure to check out the link in my description as well as the top of this video. It will get you completely caught up on everything that has been going on with this series. If you would like to support the channel, you can always do so by joining the channel membership. Much like Patreon, having multiple different tiers, from $1 to $50, from loyalty badges to getting free comics every single month. Not only does this help out the channel tremendously, but you are getting tons of perks in the process. Now, if you are unable to do that, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like this video, hit that notification bell, and with that being said, until the next breakdown.